Viewing or listening to this podcast confirms acceptance of the disclaimer visible on your screen or found at authorscott.com/podcast. Welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm Dr. Scott Johnson, your guide on this journey to natural well-being. Here we explore evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and powerful health strategies that not only inform, but inspire change. Together, we'll uncover the mysteries of human existence and unlock the secrets to thriving. This podcast is more than just knowledge. It's your catalyst for unleashing extraordinary potential. Get ready. Your journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Johnson, and I'm solo for this episode because I wanted to re-examine a popular topic discussed several episodes ago, but provide additional context and information. That topic is cholesterol, which we explored in episode 23, Busting Cholesterol Myths. But today, I wanted to discuss in more detail what cholesterol is, some additional factors that need to be considered for a more complete picture, the ideal numbers we should target, and explore some natural solutions that you can discuss with your healthcare professional. According to the World Heart Federation, elevated cholesterol affects approximately 39% of adults. This means that many of us will experience this at some point during our lifetime, and that we should each be aware of our cholesterol numbers and what we should do about them. I personally think we are too quick to put someone on a statin for high total or LDL cholesterol, especially given the risks of these medications and the importance of cholesterol for our overall health. Globally, statin use is increasing based on the belief that its cholesterol-lowering properties reduce the risk of heart disease. However, these drugs are not used without risks. Evidence shows that statin use is associated with muscle problems, from mild muscle aches and weakness to rare but severe muscle damage, increased risk of type 2 diabetes and high blood sugar levels, elevated liver enzymes, suggesting that it's harming the liver, and cognitive deficits like memory loss, confusion, and even Alzheimer's disease. In addition, statins are known to deplete vital nutrients that are important for energy production, muscle function, cancer prevention, and overall well-being, like coenzyme Q10, vitamin K2, selenium, magnesium, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and L-carnitine. So what is cholesterol and how does it get in the body? Cholesterol is a type of fat or lipid that your body requires to function properly. It's like a building material for your body, helping to make hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Build cell membranes so that they are strong and flexible, used to produce vitamin D and create bile. This may surprise many people, but your body actually produces about 80% of the cholesterol in your body, with your liver being the main factory for cholesterol production. Only 20% of the cholesterol in your body comes from food you eat. Cholesterol production and excretion is tightly controlled. So even if you eat a cholesterol-rich meal, your liver adjusts by making less cholesterol so your levels don't skyrocket. Now, some people will have very low cholesterol, around 110 to 130 milligrams per deciliter, which most doctors would be excited about and tell them they are in great health and at very low risk of heart disease. However, this low of cholesterol levels also means you are likely making insufficient sex hormones like testosterone in men and progesterone and estrogen in women, and you likely have a low sex drive. These levels of cholesterol are also associated with brain fog and mood imbalance. So we must be careful about having too little cholesterol as well. Despite the fact that our body makes most of our cholesterol, beginning in the 60s, we were advised to limit high cholesterol foods in our diet. For decades, these guidelines were followed until epidemiological studies and meta-analyses challenged this recommendation in the late 1990s. A recent comprehensive meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrients in 2022 included data, this is a long list, but bear with me, from 39 prospective cohort studies and looked at the link between egg consumption and the risk of cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, and stroke in people from North America, Europe, Asia, and multinational cohorts. 40 additional studies published between 1979 and 2023, 16 additional prospective cohort studies that assessed the association between egg intake and diabetes risk, and 3 large longitudinal cohort studies, including the Nurses Health Study that spans 1980 to 2012, the NHS2 study that spanned 1991 to 2017, and the Health Professional Follow-Up Study that followed people from 1986 to 2016, and clinical interventions studying healthy people. After reviewing all of this data, the researchers concluded that eating cholesterol doesn't really change your blood cholesterol levels because your body has ways to handle the extra cholesterol you eat. Essentially, your body reduces absorption of cholesterol from the food you eat and then makes less of it when it has sufficient levels in the body already. The body really is smarter than we give it credit for. There are 3 primary types of cholesterol in your body: low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, or LDL cholesterol, high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, or HDL, and triglycerides. I want to make something clear, though. Cholesterol is the waxy, fat-like substance being carried, while LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, these are the vehicles that carry cholesterol through the bloodstream. Cholesterol itself can't travel through the blood on its own. It needs to be carried by lipoproteins. When you measure your total cholesterol, you are measuring all of the cholesterol contained within all of the lipoproteins inside of your blood. LDL cholesterol carries cholesterol from the liver to cells throughout the body. It is often referred to as the quote-unquote bad cholesterol because higher levels are associated with plaque buildup in the arteries. However, I'm going to discuss some research about this in a moment. When it comes to LDL cholesterol, not all LDL particles are created equal. They vary in size and density, and these variations can affect their impact on cardiovascular health. Small, dense LDL particles are considered more harmful because they are more likely to penetrate the walls of arteries, contributing to atherosclerosis. They are also more susceptible to oxidation, which ignites the inflammatory cascade that exacerbates atherosclerosis and damages the arteries. Lastly, this type of LDL is linked to insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and high triglycerides. The other type of LDL particles are large and fluffy, meaning they are less dense. They are considered less harmful because they are less likely to penetrate the artery walls and less prone to oxidation. Advanced lipid testing can provide information about LDL particle size. Standard cholesterol tests typically measure the total amount of LDL cholesterol. Common advanced testing includes LDL particle number, nuclear magnetic resonance, lipoprofile, and apolipoprotein B testing. LDL particle number, or LDL-P, measures the concentration of LDL particles in the blood, meaning the number of those particles present in a given volume of blood. This is distinct from LDL cholesterol, which measures the amount of cholesterol carried by LDL particles. Essentially, the difference between LDL cholesterol and LDL-P is that LDL-P measures the actual number of vehicles circulating in your blood, regardless of how much cholesterol each one is carrying. The more LDL particles you have, the greater the chance that these vehicles will deposit cholesterol in your artery walls, forming plaque. In simpler terms, LDL cholesterol would be like measuring how much sand each truck is carrying at a work site, while LDL particle number, or LDL-P, is like counting how many trucks are making deliveries. Even if each truck isn't carrying a lot of sand, a large number of trucks can still deposit a lot of sand at the site. In the same way, a high number of LDL particles, even if they don't carry a huge load of cholesterol each, can still lead to a lot of plaque buildup in your arteries. Looking at a review published in 2018 in the journal Expert Review of Clinical Pharmacology, the researchers concluded that the hypothesis that high total cholesterol or high LDL cholesterol is the major cause of atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease is not supported by the current and available evidence. They also concluded that the authors of 3 large reviews conducted by researchers with financial ties to statin manufacturers or with conflicts of interests because of their association with statins tried to reinforce the prevailing belief that cholesterol is directly linked to heart disease. Furthermore, the researchers concluded that the conclusions in these 3 biased reviews were based on misleading statistics, the exclusion of unsuccessful trials, and the disregard of many contradictory observations. You know, this brings up an important part of modern science. Unfortunately, a lot of science is profit-driven and not real science these days. You can't trust everything that is published. For example, a review published in the BMJ indicated that industry-funded studies were almost 4 times more likely to report positive results compared to non-industry funded studies. Surveys have also indicated that a significant percentage of authors in medical research have financial ties to industry, creating obvious conflicts of interest. It's also true that articles favorable to the pharmaceutical industry are more likely to receive favorable evaluations and be published. You need to look at the financial ties of the authors and who is funding research studies. Now back to our cholesterol discussion. HDL cholesterol collects cholesterol from the bloodstream and returns it to the liver, where it can be processed for elimination. Because of this association with decreasing cholesterol levels, it is often referred to as quote unquote good cholesterol. Triglycerides are a type of fat in the blood that the body uses for energy. Excess calories that are consumed, especially from carbohydrates, are converted into triglycerides and stored in fat cells for later use as energy. Another type, very low density lipoprotein, or VLDL, is produced by the liver and releases triglycerides into the bloodstream when energy is needed. It acts in a similar way to LDL cholesterol, but has one key difference. It carries triglycerides rather than cholesterol. We also need to discuss apolipoproteins, which are proteins that bind to lipids or fats. They act like delivery trucks that carry cholesterol and triglycerides through your bloodstream. Some of the most common apolipoproteins are ApoA-I, it's a capital I, which is the main protein in HDL cholesterol and serves as a recycling truck that picks up excess cholesterol from your arteries and takes it back to the liver for disposal. ApoB protein in LDL cholesterol, and it serves more as a delivery truck, dropping off cholesterol in your arteries. It is also considered a more accurate marker for assessment of heart attack risk. Then you have ApoC-I's, which is an apolipoprotein that is for the metabolism of triglycerides. It activates an enzyme that breaks down triglycerides in the blood. Another one is ApoE. It helps transport cholesterol to the liver and is involved in the metabolism of certain lipoproteins. It also plays a role in how your body processes cholesterol and may influence your risk of heart disease and Alzheimer's disease. Lastly, I want to mention lipoprotein A. So this is lipoprotein with a small a in parentheses, which is abbreviated as LP parentheses around an A. This is essentially an LDL particle, meaning it's a complex of lipids and proteins with an extra protein attached to it called apolipoprotein A. This additional protein makes lipoprotein A very sticky, increasing its tendency to build up in artery walls. So it's important that we don't just look at cholesterol levels, but what they are made of, which includes these apolipoproteins. As we age, our body makes more cholesterol, with peak production occurring at around 50 to 51 years of age in men, and 56 to 57 years of age in women. After it reaches these peaks, cholesterol levels often decline, with men experiencing sharper declines than women. This decline in production of cholesterol is due to several factors, including changes in liver function, hormonal shifts, lipid transport changes, lifestyle changes, and any chronic conditions that a person may have. Your liver plays a key role in regulating cholesterol production. As we age, liver function can change, potentially leading to increased cholesterol synthesis or manufacturing of cholesterol. Hormonal changes, especially in women after menopause, can significantly affect cholesterol levels. Estrogen, which tends to have a favorable effect on cholesterol, decreases after menopause. Your ability to clear cholesterol from the bloodstream may also slow down with age, leading to higher circulating cholesterol levels. Another factor is adjustments in our lifestyle as we age. When we get older, we often decrease our activity levels, which can contribute to weight gain and changes in cholesterol levels. Lastly, older adults often have more chronic conditions like metabolic syndrome and diabetes, which can influence cholesterol production and metabolism. Another factor I want to discuss is several genetic predispositions that significantly increase a person's susceptibility to high cholesterol levels. Familial hypercholesterolemia is one of the most common inherited forms of high cholesterol. It's caused by mutations in genes that regulate the LDL receptor, which is responsible for removing LDL cholesterol from the bloodstream. People with these genetic mutations can get high cholesterol even at a young age. Another type is familial combined hyperlipidemia. This is another inherited lipid disorder characterized by both high cholesterol and high triglycerides. The genetic basis of this condition is not as well defined, but involves multiple genes and environmental factors. Since lipoprotein A levels are largely determined by genetics, some people can carry variants in the LPA gene. leading to significantly elevated lipoprotein A levels. Polygenic hypercholesterolemia refers to high cholesterol that results from combined effects of multiple genes, each with a small individual effect. Lastly, cytosterolemia is an inherited disorder that causes the body to absorb excess amounts of plant sterols from the diet. These plant sterols accumulate in the blood and tissues, leading to high cholesterol levels. Now, keep in mind that genes play a role, but they don't determine destiny. There are things you can do to mitigate the risks of certain genetic factors. Along the lines of genes, if you have a family history of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, particularly at younger ages, you may want to get APOE genotyping. APOE, which stands for apolipoprotein E, is a protein that plays a crucial role in how our body processes fats, specifically through the management of lipoproteins, which carry cholesterol and other lipids in the bloodstream. The gene responsible for producing this protein has 3 different versions known as alleles, E2, 3, and E4. These alleles can influence a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and cardiovascular problems. So knowing your ApoE genotype is important because it gives insights into the risk of chronic diseases based on which allele combination you have. The results of this analysis are lifelong, as our genetic makeup doesn't change. So the test itself involves a blood sample and doesn't require any special preparations. Based on the specific genotype, individuals can receive information about their likelihood of developing Alzheimer's, which can range from a 40% decreased risk to nearly 15 times more likely based on the allele combination they have. This testing is generally available through specific laboratories. Now, the lower is better philosophy regarding total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol may not always be accurate, especially when you look at research. In fact, the British Medical Journal published a study in 2020 that found both low and high levels of LDL cholesterol were associated with an increased risk of all-cause mortality. This nonlinear relationship suggests that humans should maintain cholesterol with an ideal range for optimal health, or balanced range, particularly older adults, not try to get it to the lowest level possible. A significant study that looked at 12.8 million adults, published in Scientific Reports in 2019, concluded that cholesterol levels associated with the lowest mortality risk were in the range of 160 to 280 milligrams per deciliter, with some variations based on age and sex. Specifically, total cholesterol levels associated with the lowest mortality tended to be between 210 and 249 milligrams per deciliter, except for men aged 18 to 34 years, where it was 180 to 219 milligrams per deciliter. Women aged 18 to 34 years, where the sweet spot was 160 to 199 milligrams per deciliter. And lastly, women aged 35 to 44 years, that should target 180 to 219 milligrams per deciliter. One more study I want to mention about total cholesterol was published in the journal Medicine in 2019. It looked at the association between total cholesterol and ischemic heart disease and overall cardiovascular disease deaths in over 503,000 adults. The conclusion was that ideal range for total cholesterol in relation to the lowest cardiovascular disease mortality was 180 to 200 milligrams per deciliter. But this is incomplete. Some would say meaningless to only consider total cholesterol and not look at triglycerides, ApoB, lipo-A, and oxidized LDL. A similar study was performed to evaluate the link between HDL cholesterol levels and mortality in 15.8 million adults. This study found that HDL cholesterol ranges associated with the lowest mortality and varied by sex and age. The ideal range for men under age 65 was 40 to 59 milligrams per deciliter and 50 to 69 milligrams per deciliter for those over 65. In women under age 45, the ideal HDL range was 40 to 69 milligrams per deciliter and 50 to 79 milligrams per deciliter for those 45 and older, suggesting women need to maintain higher HDL levels for their health. The interesting finding of this study was that high HDL in younger adults considered over 60 milligrams per deciliter was linked to higher mortality risk. So keep in mind, we're told we want higher HDL levels. In fact, normal is considered 60 or higher. But this may not always be the case, especially in younger people. This research emphasizes that the relationship between HDL cholesterol and mortality is complex and not simply the higher the better. It highlights the importance of considering age and sex when interpreting HDL cholesterol levels. It also reinforces the notion that relying solely on traditional lipid markers like HDL cholesterol can be misleading, and we need to take a more comprehensive approach to cholesterol. When it comes to triglyceride research, a major study that sheds light on its association with cardiovascular disease is one done by researchers at Duke University in 2020 and published in the Journal of Clinical Lipidology. This study determined a few key things. One, taking the average of multiple triglyceride measurements is more predictive of cardiovascular disease than a single measurement. Two, an association with triglyceride levels and cardiovascular disease was observed even at the current recommended normal range of 150 milligrams per deciliter or lower. Lastly, the researchers concluded that an optimal fasting triglyceride level of less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, or perhaps even lower, is ideal. Several studies suggest that low HDL and high triglycerides are strong predictors of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and cardiovascular disease risk. That's because this ratio reflects atherogenic high cholesterol patterns, insulin resistance, and small, dense LDL particles, which are more prone to oxidation and arterial plaque formation. The HDL to triglycerides ratio is considered by many researchers and clinicians to be one of the most important indicators of cardiovascular health, potentially more predictive than total cholesterol or LDL alone. One of the landmark studies in cholesterol research is the Framingham Heart Study, published in 1997. This study found that high triglycerides and low HDL were strongly associated with coronary heart disease and concluded that your triglyceride to HDL ratio was a better predictor of heart disease than LDL cholesterol alone. Another study published in the American Journal of Cardiology in 2005 reported that a high triglyceride to HDL cholesterol ratio correlated strongly with small, dense LDL particles, which, again, are more dangerous than the large, fluffy LDL cholesterol. One more study from 2010 in the European Heart Journal also found that the triglyceride to HDL ratio was a strong predictor of heart attack risk independent of LDL cholesterol levels. So in a nutshell, a high triglyceride to HDL ratio is linked to small, dense LDL cholesterol particles that are more likely to cause plaque buildup, while a low triglyceride to HDL cholesterol ratio is associated with larger, less harmful LDL particles. When it comes to this ratio, the normal ratio is 2.0 or below, while 3.0 or above indicates a higher risk of heart disease, and 4.0 or above is indicative of metabolic dysfunction or insulin resistance. But based on the research I've reviewed, I'd recommend aiming for a more ideal ratio of 1.5 or lower, with as close to 1.0 as possible being best. To calculate this ratio, you simply divide your triglyceride level by your HDL cholesterol level. For example, if my triglycerides are 85 and my HDL cholesterol is 78, then I get a ratio of 1.09, which is a very healthy ratio. A factor that is frequently overlooked when we become myopic and focus solely on cholesterol levels is the inflammatory cascade. The inflammatory cascade plays a crucial and complex role in the development and progression of atherosclerosis, which is the underlying cause of most cardiovascular diseases. When the inner lining of the arteries, called the endothelium, gets damaged, this triggers an inflammatory and immune response. Your body sends out its repair crew of immune cells to fix the damage. LDL cholesterol infiltrates the damaged arterial wall and can become oxidized in the process. Immune cells called macrophages try to engulf or consume this oxidized LDL cholesterol, but when they consume too much of it, they become overloaded and turn into foam cells. Essentially, the macrophages have eaten too much and become bloated with cholesterol, giving them a foamy appearance under a microscope. As foam cells build up in the arteries like piles of trash no one is taking out, plaque forms inside the artery wall. The body recognizes this and continues to send more immune cells to repair the area, but the problem only gets worse. Over time, enough plaque builds up to narrow the arteries and reduce blood flow. If the clogged artery supplies blood to your heart, it can cause a heart attack. If it supplies blood to your brain, it can cause a stroke. If it supplies blood to your legs, it can cause peripheral artery disease. Basically, through a complex interplay of various molecules like cytokines, chemokines, and adhesion molecules, what is meant to be a beneficial repair process turns pathogenic unless the inflammatory cascade is halted. If it isn't stopped, eventually you have a plaque buildup and chronic inflammation that contributes to cardiovascular disease. This is why it is important that you have your homocysteine, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and erythrocyte sedimentation rate checked at your annual physicals. High homocysteine tells us if there's something potentially irritating your arteries. C-reactive protein, or CRP, assesses general inflammation. High sensitivity C-reactive protein, or HS-CRP, is a more sensitive version of the standard CRP test that can detect lower levels of CRP in the blood, making it useful for evaluating chronic low-grade inflammation. HS-CRP is more useful for assessing cardiovascular risk, especially among people with risk factors but normal cholesterol levels. And erythrocyte sedimentation rate, or ESR, identifies how much inflammation is present. Taken together, these tests help you understand if there is inflammation in your body and how much. Isolated, these tests are not very valuable. For instance, an MTHFR mutation can increase homocysteine, while infections, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, or other inflammatory conditions can increase HS-CRP and ESR. By monitoring these markers, your healthcare professional can get a sense of whether the inflammatory cascade is active and how severe it is. If these markers are elevated, it suggests that there's ongoing inflammation, which could be contributing to cardiovascular disease risk. Another factor that is important is the link between metabolic dysfunction and cholesterol, particularly insulin resistance. In fact, I would say these is probably one of the most important but oft overlooked factors is your metabolic function and your ability to respond to insulin. While the connection between insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, and cardiovascular disease is complex, fundamentally, they all contribute to a state of chronic metabolic imbalance that significantly raises cardiovascular disease risk. Insulin is a hormone that helps your cells absorb glucose or sugar from the bloodstream for energy usage. Insulin resistance occurs when your cells become less responsive to the insulin your body produces, requiring your pancreas to produce more and more insulin to maintain normal blood sugar levels. One way to imagine this is to use a key and lock analogy. Insulin acts as the key and unlocks the doors of cells to let glucose inside for energy production. With insulin resistance, the locks on the doors become rusty, making it harder to turn that key. In response, the body makes more keys or more insulin to force the doors open, but this isn't helpful and leads to both high blood sugar and insulin levels. The link between insulin resistance and cardiovascular disease is the fact that elevated blood glucose levels can lead to the formation of advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. AGEs contribute to endothelial dysfunction, which is a precursor to atherosclerosis. High glucose levels also trigger a chronic inflammatory response and oxidative stress in the vascular system, further contributing to the development of atherosclerosis and cardiovascular complications. So when you go to your annual physical, and perhaps more often, you should be looking at your A1C levels, which is a measure of your blood sugar control over about 90 days. A1C serves as a marker for your overall metabolic state. It reflects the percentage of hemoglobin, or the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen, that has glucose attached to it. The higher the blood glucose levels, the more hemoglobin is glycated. While this is a primary biomarker used to assess glucose control and diabetes, elevated A1C levels are associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. A1C results are reported as a percentage, with under 5.7% being considered normal, 5.7 to 6.4% pre-diabetes, and 6.5% or higher diabetes. I'll share an optimal or ideal range for cardiovascular health when we get to the numbers a little bit later. An emerging biomarker to help understand how lipoproteins are influenced by insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction is the lipoprotein insulin resistance test, or LPIR. The LPIR test was developed by researchers who sought a more precise way to understand individual metabolic dysfunction, particularly in the context of insulin resistance and its relationship with cardiovascular health. It is calculated using a combination of lipid measurements, including total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and other lipid fractions, which refers to the different types and compositions of lipoproteins in the blood. The LPIR score uniquely incorporates these various lipid fractions to provide a comprehensive overview of how an individual's lipid metabolism is functioning, particularly in response to insulin, because insulin plays a crucial role in metabolism, fat storage, and the regulation of lipoprotein synthesis and clearance. If you are insulin resistant, a series of metabolic changes occurs that alters lipid profiles. If you are in a state of adaptive lipid metabolism, or one where your lipid metabolism is functioning correctly and responding appropriately to insulin, you typically have favorable lipid profiles, good metabolic function, and reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. On the other hand, if you are in a state of maladaptive lipid metabolism, which is commonly seen in insulin resistance, you tend to have lipid profiles that contribute to cardiovascular risk and poor metabolic function. There is a growing body of evidence suggesting that alterations in lipoprotein metabolism, particularly in the context of insulin resistance, are associated with increased cardiovascular risk. The LPIR test can potentially identify individuals who are at a higher risk for developing conditions like coronary artery disease by providing a more nuanced understanding of their lipoprotein metabolism. An LPIR score of less than 30 is associated with normal insulin sensitivity, healthy metabolic function, and reduced cardiovascular disease risk. A score of 30 to 50 can indicate mild insulin resistance and warrants lifestyle modifications to improve metabolic health. And a score of greater than 50 is a sign of significant insulin resistance that may require more aggressive interventions. Okay, so now that we better understand the tests that we can perform, what cholesterol is, and the lipoproteins that we need to be aware of, let's talk about ideal ranges of biomarkers that we should target for cholesterol, triglycerides, lipoproteins, inflammation, and glucose. Current guidelines suggest total cholesterol should be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter, but based on the research I've shared on all-cause mortality, which provides a broader perspective capturing both direct and indirect effects of cholesterol levels on overall survival and its influence on other health conditions, then the following are better guides for ideal ranges of total cholesterol. Men aged 18 to 34 should aim for 180 to 219 milligrams per deciliter. Men aged 35 plus, 210 to 249 milligrams per deciliter. Women aged 18 to 34, 160 to 199 milligrams per deciliter. Women aged 35 to 44, 180 to 219 milligrams per deciliter. And women 45 plus, 210 to 249 milligrams per deciliter. You could go up to about 280 milligrams per deciliter based on that study, as long as the other markers are within optimal ranges, such as triglyceride and your metabolic function. A 2023 study in Scientific Reports concluded that LDL cholesterol levels need to be 90 less than or equal to 6 milligrams per deciliter to reduce the risk of all-cause mortality. But keep in mind that this number is less vital than your triglyceride to HDL ratio, LDL particle size, oxidized LDL, and others. You mainly want to check this number to make sure you don't have high triglycerides and high LDL cholesterol simultaneously. When it comes to LDL particle number, or the LDL-P test, less than 1,000 nanomoles per liter is optimum, and above 2,000 nanomoles per liter indicates the highest risk of cardiovascular disease. VLDL is typically within normal ranges if you are between 15 and 20 milligrams per deciliter. I mentioned oxidized LDL or ox-LDL earlier, and this is not usually going to be a standard test performed, but you can ask for it if you're concerned or have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. You want to aim for less than 60 units per liter to be in the lowest risk category. For HDL, men under 65 want to be at 40 to 55. For HDL, men under 65 want to be at 40 to 59 milligrams per deciliter, and men 65 plus 50 to 69 milligrams per deciliter. Women under 45 should aim for 40 to 69 milligrams per deciliter, and women 45 plus should aim for 40 to 79 milligrams per deciliter. You want your triglycerides to be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, but also evaluate them as part of a triglyceride to HDL cholesterol ratio. ApoB is ideally less than 60 milligrams per deciliter, with above 110 milligrams per deciliter indicating the highest risk. The lipoprotein A test is considered normal when it's below 14 milligrams per deciliter. Your triglyceride to HDL ratio is considered normal if it's 2.0 or below, but the ideal ratio, again, is going to be less than or equal to 1.5, and the closer to 1, the better. While a ratio of total cholesterol to triglycerides lower than 5 is considered normal, the ideal ratio is less than 3.5. You should ideally be under 30 on your LPIR score. This biomarker is more predictive of cardiovascular and metabolic health than total cholesterol or LDL cholesterol. So it's worth advocating to have it performed when your blood is drawn to evaluate other blood biomarkers. An optimal A1C is considered 4.5 to 5%, but below 5.7% is considered normal. For your HS-CRP, you want this number to be less than 1 milligrams per deciliter, because a result between 1 and 3 puts you at moderate risk for cardiovascular disease, and 3.0 or higher is considered high risk for cardiovascular disease. The normal range of homocysteine is 5 to 15 micromoles per liter. Above 15 is considered high and places people at a greater risk for cardiovascular disease. Your ESR values vary by sex and age. Women should be under 20 millimeters per hour if they are under age 50, and under 30 millimeters per hour if they are 50 plus. Men should be under 15 millimeters per hour if they are under 50, and under 20 millimeters per hour if they are over 50 or 50 or plus. So if you are going to prioritize the most important cholesterol-related biomarkers for you to monitor regularly, they are triglyceride to HDL ratio and total cholesterol to HDL ratio, your HS-CRP, LPIR, and A1C. And then, of course, your ApoB. For the last part of this episode, I want to share some ideas for natural ways to improve your lipid profiles, metabolic health, and inflammation. Keep in mind that this is not medical advice and is only provided for informational purposes. You should discuss all of this with your personal healthcare professional to create an individualized plan and avoid interactions with medications. Lifestyle adjustments should be your first course of action, including dietary modification to reduce added sugars and incorporate healthy fats. Weight loss should be a priority if you are overweight or obese, and you should aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week. Brisk walking is a great way to improve your insulin sensitivity and glycemic response, especially after a meal, according to the published research. Most of the time, this is a 30 to 60 minute walk after eating. Sleep, you should aim for 7 to 9 hours per night. And of course, we want to manage our stress and our emotions as well. Now, the first supplement I want to mention is berberine. Berberine is an active alkaloid compound found in several plants, including the roots, stems, and bark of barberry. A meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Pharmacology, published in 2021, reviewed data from 18 studies and concluded that it improves lipid profiles, total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and HDL cholesterol, and insulin resistance. Another meta-analysis in the journal Molecules in 2022 reported that berberine decreased triglycerides, and ApoB as well. So this one ingredient hits many of the most common or the most important biomarkers associated with metabolic function and lipid metabolism. The dosage most commonly used in studies is 500 milligrams twice daily, but it can be taken up to 3 times daily if necessary. Now, take berberine with food to minimize GI discomfort. If you do take it on an empty stomach, some people can get a little bit of stomach irritation or upset from that. Another popular supplement, although you need to make sure you get a high quality product, is red yeast rice. Red yeast rice naturally contains cholesterol lowering lovastatin compounds. The primary active lovastatin compound in this supplement is monoclonin K, which is chemically identical to prescription statins. Based on this, it will suppress production of cholesterol by the liver in a similar manner. However, it is known to have fewer side effects because it provides a lower dose of lovastatin compounds than pharmaceuticals. As I mentioned, you need to get a high quality product because independent reports show many red yeast rice supplements don't have any monoclonin K in them, insufficient monoclonin K, and even worse, some are contaminated with citrinin, which is a mycotoxin produced by fungi linked to potential kidney toxicity. Normally, I don't recommend specific brands, but here I want to point out that tests performed by consumer labs determined that HPF Colstein had the highest concentration of lovastatin compounds among the products they tested at the lowest cost, making it their top pick. You'll likely need to find this outside of Amazon.com because of regulatory issues related to the naturally occurring lovastatin compounds in red yeast rice. Meta-analyses of red yeast rice supplements known to have sufficient monoclonin K show that it reduces total and LDL cholesterol, but the dosing varies widely in these published studies. Commercially available supplements usually recommend 1,200 milligrams twice daily with food. Alpha lipoic acid is a naturally occurring compound that plays a crucial role in cellular metabolism, particularly in the conversion of glucose and other substances into energy. Not surprisingly, given its effects on glucose utilization, insulin sensitivity, and lipid metabolism, a meta-analysis found that it reduces total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and triglycerides. Dosing in clinical studies ranged from 300 to 1,200 milligrams per day, but the most common dose is usually 600 milligrams per day. Some research suggests that you can increase its bioavailability when taken with food, so take this supplement with a meal. Some additional supplements to talk to your healthcare professional about if you need to address inflammation are boswellic acids, curcumin or turmeric, and ginger. Take these according to the supplement labels or as recommended by an informed practitioner. When it comes to essential oils, we need to rely mostly on preclinical research, with the exception of lemongrass essential oil. A clinical study reported that ingesting capsules containing 140 milligrams of lemongrass essential oil, which is roughly 3 drops, improved cholesterol profiles in 36% of the trial participants. The research hypothesized that the decrease was the result of the oil suppressing an enzymatic pathway involved in cholesterol creation. Now, these results are fairly modest, so it may be beneficial to add a citrus essential oil like lemon, tangerine, or orange because they are all rich in limonene. Limonene is known to activate peroxisome proliferator activated receptors and liver X receptors, which are pathways involved in lipid metabolism. So theoretically, you could take a capsule with 1 drop of lemongrass and 4 drops of a citrus oil 3 times daily with meals. Copaiba essential oil works on multiple pathways to help support a healthy inflammatory response. So it would be a good option to take in soft gels, capsules, or directly on or under the tongue if you need that support for the inflammatory cascade. Aim for about 3 drops 2 to 3 times daily. The last essential oils that I'll mention work more on insulin sensitivity and glucose management, and they are related. They're cassia and cinnamon bark. Both of these oils are rich in a constituent called trans-cinnamaldehyde, which is known to directly stimulate the beta cells in the pancreas to release insulin. It also makes your cells more sensitive to insulin by improving a process called tyrosine phosphorylation, which acts like a signal switch, allowing insulin to work more effectively. These are quite irritating oils, so they should always be taken in a soft gel or capsule. The dosing isn't well defined for these oils, but you could start with 1 drop of either oil in a capsule twice daily and adjust from there as needed. Well, there you have it. I hope this episode has been enlightening and empowering so that you can have an educated discussion with your healthcare professional about cholesterol and metabolic function and how to manage it. Please like, subscribe, and share to help others be informed as well. Until next time, I wish you health and happiness. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. I hope you've gained insights to elevate your health and life. For more transformative evidence-based wisdom, I invite you to explore my 20-plus books at authorscott.com/shop. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your health and guide others to a better life. Like, share, and subscribe to join the movement transforming lives. Here's to your journey toward boundless health and happiness.